Picture this. You just bought your absolute dream home. The ink is barely dry on the paperwork, the keys are finally in your hand, and you unlock the front door to your future. It's an incredible feeling, right? But then, you slowly, terrifyingly, start to realize that something else might already be living there. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping right into the shadows to unravel a mystery that has completely gripped both hardcore believers and die-hard skeptics alike. We are diving into New York's haunted legacy.
So, right off the bat, we have to ask, could this house genuinely be haunted, or is there a darker, maybe much more rational explanation hiding in the details? I mean, the claims surrounding the specific property are deeply unsettling. We are talking about heavy, methodical footsteps echoing through completely empty hallways. We're talking doors just swinging open on their own, shadow figures randomly materializing in photographs, and visitors consistently reporting the sudden, suffocating feeling of being watched, even when they know for an absolute fact they're completely alone in the room. Some very experienced paranormal investigators have actually walked into this house looking for answers, and you know what? They left with even more questions. So in this explainer, we are going to impartially examine one of New York's absolute most chilling legends to figure out exactly what is happening behind those locked doors.
Section 1. A House of Dark Repute.
Now, when you think of New York, your mind probably jumps straight to towering skyscrapers, yellow cabs, and the constant hustle of the city streets. But tucked away in the state's much quieter, unassuming neighborhoods are stories that are far more unsettling. One property in particular has earned a genuinely terrifying reputation for unexplained phenomena. Literally, for decades, homeowners, completely casual visitors, and professional investigators have all reported strange events inside this house that simply refuse to stop. And these reports, they run the entire gamut. Everything from mysterious, disembodied sounds echoing at night to straight-up terrifying sightings of shadow-like figures darting across the room. As these stories inevitably spread from neighbor to neighbor, the house firmly cemented itself as one of New York's most haunted locations. But to truly understand how a house earns a reputation quite like this one, we really have to go back and look at exactly how the legend began.
Section 2. The First Unexplained Events. You know, haunting legends almost never start with some massive dramatic climax. They build up, slowly. At first, right during the initial move-in phase, the incidents seemed completely harmless. Small, everyday objects would disappear, only to miraculously reappear in totally different locations a few days later. At the time, it was super easy to just dismiss it as the stress of moving or simple absent-mindedness. But then, a few weeks later, the physical environment of the house actually started reacting. Lights would flicker unexpectedly for no reason. People would walk through strange, intensely localized cold spots that completely defied the heating systems. And then, late at night, things escalated to a point where they became impossible to ignore. We're talking heavy footsteps echoing clearly from rooms that were known to be completely empty. The final straw for the residents? Hearing very distinct whispers when absolutely nobody else was in the house. As the fear grew, so did the sheer volume of these reported encounters.
Section 3. Shadows in the Hallways.
Okay, so here is where things take a serious turn. The phenomena were no longer just things you could hear or feel, like a cold draft or a strange bump in the night. They actually became things you could see. Witnesses began describing this incredibly powerful, almost suffocating feeling of being watched. Then people started spotting dark, human-shaped silhouettes just standing completely silently in the hallways. Sometimes these figures were just caught in the corner of an eye, but other times, they lingered for agonizing seconds before seemingly vanishing into thin air. Even seasoned, veteran investigators admitted that the atmosphere inside this particular house felt thick, heavy, and highly unusual. The dread was honestly so palpable that some visitors flat out refused to even cross the threshold into certain rooms. Whether this reaction was purely psychological or genuinely paranormal, one thing is for sure: the experiences left deep, lasting impressions on anyone who walked through those doors.
Section 4. Evidence or Coincidence.
So as these stories of shadow figures spread like wildfire, the house naturally became a total magnet for those looking to capture tangible, irrefutable proof. The investigators arrived, and they were armed to the teeth. They mounted cameras in the most historically active corners of the house. They set up high-fidelity audio recorders to continuously monitor the dead silence overnight, and they placed motion sensors to guard the darkest hallways. And the results of all this overnight monitoring? Well, the investigators claim they actually captured unexplained sounds, mysterious voices, and incredibly, even photographs that seem to show those very same shadowy silhouettes the residents had been so terrified of.
But, as you might expect, this evidence definitely didn't convince everyone. In fact, it sparked a really fierce divide. Believers looked at the data gathered that night and saw absolute proof. They heard unexplained voices and saw mysterious shadows caught right on tape. Skeptics, however, looked at the exact same data and saw something completely grounded in reality. They pointed out that the supposed voices were likely just audio artifacts from cheap recording equipment, and those terrifying shadows just visual anomalies caused by poor lighting and digital camera artifacting. It's fascinating how two groups can look at the exact same piece of evidence and come away with two totally different realities. And because of that, the debate only intensified.
Section 5. The scientific explanation. To really understand a mystery like this one, we absolutely have to take a step back and look impartially at how science breaks down these kinds of claims. Skeptics routinely challenge haunted house lore using simple physics and basic architecture, which makes a lot of sense. Think about it. Massive temperature shifts throughout the day easily cause old wood to expand and contract, creating loud echoing creaks that sound exactly like footsteps. Flickering lights? More often than not, that is usually just outdated faulty wiring rather than a ghost trying to communicate. And those booming, heavy sounds from upstairs? That is very often just the natural structural settling of an incredibly old building.
But honestly, perhaps the most compelling scientific argument here isn't even about the physical building at all. It's about human psychology. It really comes down to the incredible power of expectation. When you walk into a house that you already expect to be haunted, ordinary, everyday events suddenly seem extraordinary. Fear actually physically amplifies our perception. A completely normal draft from a poorly sealed window suddenly becomes a spirit brushing past you. A creaky floorboard becomes an intruder. Fear basically puts all of our senses into overdrive, manipulating our perception and turning mere coincidences into terrifying, deeply meaningful events. But having said all of that, even with all these perfectly logical explanations on the table, some of the reports from this specific house remain incredibly difficult to fully explain away.
Section 6. An enduring New York legend.
Despite decades of intense debate, thorough investigations, and rigorous scientific scrutiny, this house continues to draw people in. The legend firmly lives right there in that blurry space between certainty and imagination. Believers arrive hoping to experience the supernatural firsthand, while skeptics arrive armed with logic, completely ready to disprove the whole thing. Yet the mystery stubbornly survives them both. The absolute truth about New York's most haunted house may honestly never be fully known, but with every single new witness who walks through those doors and every new unexplained event that gets reported, another layer is added to the folklore. It is a compelling, chilling story that simply refuses to die out.
So, after examining the whole timeline of events, hearing about the terrifying shadow figures, looking at the contested evidence, and weighing it all against the cold, hard science, we are left with one final, undeniable question. Knowing absolutely everything you now know about what supposedly happens behind those doors, would you spend a night inside?